Okay, so let's take a look at I'm going to walk you through the slide template, which is also your outline for your virtual presentation. So here, uh, you can see the title slide. So I've prefabbed this for you. You see there's in each of the slide, you've got some some school social work. Um, Logos at the bottom, and you have the topic at the top. So coming back to the title slide, so you are welcome to move this around where you see title and your name, even the integrated behavioral health policy type. You can move that stuff around. I definitely want you to feel like you can be creative. I think I would prefer you leave the logos at the bottom because I want it to look I want this to be somewhat of a simulation for you, um, like as if you were presenting for, maybe an agency that you're working for, or even if it's your own practice. You'll have your own. You probably have your own. If you did that, you might have your own logo and stuff that you would want on your slides. So that's the idea behind that. But in terms of the particularly for the title slide itself, make a splash. You can certainly, and throughout, I'm encouraging you to be creative and don't be shy about putting graphics in and especially if you feel comfortable with that stuff. You don't have to be super technologically or graphically inclined. You're not being graded on, oh, hey, this is real splashy, and oh, this one is just, not so much. You all do want some graphical content in there to help just keep your audience engaged. But I want you to also feel creative. If your inclination is to have, lots of bursts of color and a lot of sort of artistry to it, I want you to feel creative. Make this your own. If you're more inclined to like, sort of less on the graphics and color, that's just more your style. That's cool too. Okay, so really want you to sort of find your own artistic inclination in here, but do feel like you have a chance to be creative. Okay, so you can move your title and your presenter name and the school and the course title around however you like and make that title slide your own. Okay, so first slide. Oh, and by the way, before we go any further, so you'll see in the slide template there are 10 slides. So I don't have a minimum or maximum number of slides that you need to do. Obviously, you'll probably need the minimum of 10 here to capture each one of these aspects of the outline of your presentation. But you don't have a cap on, if you get through with just 10 slides, that's cool. If you need a bunch more slides than that the number of slides is not important to me. What is important to me is making sure you do stay, as I said in the other assignment instructions, make sure you do keep it to that 5 to 10 minute window. Um, like I said, really where it can be a struggle is when multiple students go way over that time, and it just makes it harder to get through all the presentations and I do want to make sure I give everybody, everybody gets the same level of attention for their full presentation. So however many slides you need to hit that 5 to 10 minute window in a way that feels comfortable for you. There's not a slide minimum or maximum requirement, just a duration requirement. Okay. All right. So topic introduction. The point of that is like you may need multiple slides um, for one of these parts of your outline, and you may only need one for other parts of the outline. Okay, you're empowered to figure that part out for yourself. So topic introduction, again, just a mix of text and some graphics to introduce your topic. Then introduce your primary source, so the main article that you're going to be basing your presentation on. Okay, and maybe just summarize that article a little bit. If you want to pull a graphic, a picture from that article, like let's say what I might do, going over here for a second, is I might take a screenshot. You don't have to do this, right? This is just an artistic suggestion. You might take a screenshot of the the logo of the publisher and maybe the lead title or so I might like do a screen capture of part of the screen as a for instance, right? Nothing you have to do, just giving you an example, okay? But also talk about a little bit about your article, why you selected it, how it relates to the topic that you're taking on, okay? What's the summary of the problem? So whatever you're taking on relates to. I prefer the word challenge, by the way. Uh, if I, people more sometimes more comfortable with the word problem. You say it's a challenge, and people might get confused. But for me, it's really about what are the challenges, right? A big part of this course is looking at a range of not just integrated behavioral health concepts, but what are the healthcare and public health and broader societal challenges that were related to each of the topics that we're taking on, right? So these we're usually not presenting like, hey, this is great. I want to talk about how this is so great, like we're selling cell phone plans, right? We're talking about we're talking about challenges and how to try to make real tangible progress against sometimes significant challenges in our healthcare and our society both. Okay. Um, what is policy specific? Whoops. What are the policy specific challenges? So you may take on a very policy specific topic, which is great. You may have something that's more less directly involved in policy, like the article I was showing as an example has maybe more immediately clinical and of course has some policy behind it. And so wherever you fall on that, even if your topic is more sort of more clinical focus, um, there's think about what are the policy specific challenges behind it. Where is policy supporting it? Where is policy failing it, if you will? Okay. Um, and then what are the social work specific challenges? What do we value as social work? Sometimes what are policy challenges in terms of budgetary things are not necessarily social work specific challenges. They relate to social work because making a program like the one I was referencing in that West Virginia article is has social work challenges and policy challenges. So trying to just tease those out a little bit in your presentation. Okay, where do these problems come from? So and by the way, now we're kind of getting. You'll notice here that we're migrating from summary to impressions. So up to this point, you're sort of presenting your topic and and summarizing it. So here, as we move forward, now we're really getting into what are your thoughts? What are your impressions, your thoughts, your conclusions, your recommendations about the topic that you are taking on in your presentation? So to start with that, what is the etiology? Where does this problem come from? Why do we have this problem? Some of that you can say you can support maybe with data. Like there's a desert provider desert for maternal care and for mental health care in this geography. We can support that with data. It may be more abstract than that. That hey, we just don't value maternal care. We don't value women enough in our society. So bring that up and you talk about that a little bit. Relate in terms of where does, in your opinion, does this problem? What is the etiology? Where does it come from? Why do we have it? Okay. Who are the stakeholders and why it's a priority? Right. And a lot of times when looking at these things, when I'm putting together content for a topic, I'm thinking about the range of stakeholders, right? So these may be policy related, these may be advocates, these may be clinical providers. Certainly, there's a consumers, there's the public, there are patients, there are clients. So trying to identify kind of a continuum of the most relevant stakeholders and why is this a priority to those stakeholders, right? For a consumer, a patient, a client, family member of a patient or a client, that might be very obvious. For policymakers and people in positions of power, it may be less obvious to them. So why would it be a priority to those people, especially those who it may be less obvious to? Okay. Recommendations. what actions need to be taken. So there's no minimum maximum number. We try to, if you want, people are like, okay, well, how many recommendations do you want? So let's say three. Okay, you can do two. If you do two, like okay, I'm not going to get up. So two versus three. Three is a good number to get to. Um, Maybe five on the outside in, but really think more about quality versus quantity of recommendations, um, and so and try to relate it to the some of the data points in a particular in the topic in the article that you're in your that you're presenting upon, and then combine that with your impressions. So it doesn't have to be all data driven. It can be. It's also about your interpretation. Okay, here are my impressions. You're combining your impressions with data to formulate your viewpoint and your recommendations, and then you support them thereof. Like here's the data, here's how I interpret the data, hence my recommendation, kind of thing. If that makes sense. Um, and when you're thinking about your slide or slides for recommendations, think about okay, how do we convince those stakeholders? Sometimes some of the things that we are advocating for can be very difficult cases to make for a variety of reasons, and so think about that a little bit. What is how can we prevent what's a convincing argument, right, to myself and your social work peers. A particular recommendation may be pretty obvious and pretty easy to convince others of. Other people who are in positions of power and decision making may not be so easy to convince and may be quite skeptical depending on what the topic is or the recommendation is. So think about that and just maybe talk about that a little bit in your recommendations. And again, doing all that, sort of the quality of the recommendation, and meaning thinking it through, is more important than like, hey, you do 10 recommendations, that's way better than three. Don't that's sort of the opposite of what I want you to think. Okay, in terms of doing the recommendations part. All right, and then finally, just concluding and wrapping up, and you can talk about your motivation for the topic earlier in the presentation when you're first opening, if you would like to. I find that sort of bringing it home about why I thought this was. Sorry if you see me being distracted. That's why. Um, this is where I like to insert the movement. This is why it's important. This is why it's important to me, and this is why I believe it's important to the people affected. Why it might even be important to the decision makers, and why it's important for humanity and society. So you don't have to exactly speak to motivation in that way. And like I said, you can, if you have a very personal motivation, if it's based on some experience or experiences you've had, then you're welcome to share that. You don't have to, but if you would like to, you're certainly welcome to, and would appreciate it. Um, so that's it. As you hear my puppies all run out the door in unison. That is the walkthrough for your presentation outline.